Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way podcast, in conversation with Gavin Horgan. My name's Liz Webb, and for this episode I'm joined by the Headmaster of Millfield, Gavin Horgan. Good afternoon, Gavin, and welcome to the Millfield Way podcast.
Hello, Liz.
I'm really looking forward to this podcast as I'll be able to delve into your vision of Millfield, the journey you've brought the school on over the last 4.5 years, and the direction of its future from the man steering the ship. So let's start at the beginning. You became head in September 2018. What attracted you to Millfield?
I think I was attracted by the diversity that is Millfield. We have children from 70 different countries coming to the school. We've got a massive diversity in terms of people's brilliance, people's interests. We've got neurological diversity and we've got social diversity. We've got diversity of sexual orientation. Millfield is the complete reflection of the world today. And that was the first reason, it was the diversity. The second reason is that Millfield is not shackled by tradition. Millfield has always been hungry and aspirational. What matters most to the Millfield community, both old and new, and I suspect future, is that Millfield is on the move and that Millfield is never resting. And it was exciting to be part of that. And also, I think Millfield was looking for something different. My sense is that my own background, which we might come on to later, appealed to Millfield, and it takes two to tango. And I suspect that there was a huge appeal of Millfield to me, and I hope me to Millfield as well.
So let's go into your background, if we can. What was your background before teaching? I know you've worked in both the state and independent sectors, and also what motivated you to become a teacher in the first place?
I was tremendously lucky. I was the benefit of a massive bursary. I was the beneficiary of an assisted place at school. And that allowed me, the child of a post office worker and a special needs teacher, to attend one of the country's best independent schools. And that transformed my life. I got a place at Oxford University, and the rest of my career has come from those really strong stepping stones that I was able to get through bursary support in school. I studied classics at Oxford, and that was amazing because it allowed me to invest in education for education's sake. It's probably fair to say, it was clear at the end of 5 years of studying classics at Oxford that there wasn't an obvious career trajectory for me, but I have had other careers in translation work. And in fact, as a farmer, I paid for my time at university because my parents couldn't afford the university fees. So I worked as a tractor driver every holiday in order to pay for those fees. And I have worked in state and independent education, and I've worked in the UK and abroad in Sri Lanka and in Argentina.
If you could have dinner with 5 old Millfieldians, Gavin, which ones would they be and why?
I want you to let me have one person who isn't technically an old Millfieldian on the list, but I feel that our guest of honour should be Boss Meyer. I think that we still have a lot to learn from him, and we've got to thank him for what he achieved. Doing the cooking would be James Nathan, winner of MasterChef. We'd be hosting it at one of Arjun Oberoi's beautiful hotels. Ella Eyre would be there for her attitude and also to sing. And Helen Glover would be there so that I could ask her quite what it takes to be a double Olympian, gold medalist, and 3 times world champion and 2 times European champion. I think it'd be a fascinating dinner.
Sounds like it'd be an interesting conversation all round.
I'm looking forward to the food as well.
Where did you go to school, and what were your best memories of your time at school? And also, were there things that you would have changed about your own educational experience?
I went to a little prep school that no longer exists in southwest Scotland, and then I went to St Mary's Hall, the prep school, to Stonyhurst College in Lancashire. Age 10, I went away to board, and I went to the senior school there to the college age 13, where I stayed all the way through to my A-levels. that was quite a big thing for me. We lived in a little rural village in southwest Scotland, an ex-mining village, and I think it was a tremendous act of love by my parents because they recognised that aspiration levels were really low in our local community. It was not typical for children to remain in education post-16, and those that did typically ended up in low-paid roles or unemployed. And our parents loved us so much that they sent us away because they recognised that education was going to be the one thing that changed our outcomes. And I suspect I didn't realise that until much later on. But by going to that school, I realised that your skills, your brilliance, your brain could unlock pretty much any door for you. And I discovered I was quite good at languages. I was fascinated by the outdoors and by the environment. I was fascinated by mathematics and engineering, and I had a particular aptitude, I think, for classics, and that was what led me to university. I suspect I was at my happiest when I was outdoors at school. We did a great deal of cycling and rock climbing and mountaineering, and we also did construction of some fairly huge buildings, all in the outdoors, all from scratch. And all of those things fascinated me. And to be honest, I was sometimes happier doing that than I was doing my homework. But I guess I must have got the homework done because I managed to get decent A-levels and off to Oxford University.
So you talk about being outdoors there. What was your favourite subject? And can you remember a favourite teacher? And what was it about them that you thought was really good?
I had a teacher called John Traps Lomax. And Mr. Traps Lomax, or Traps, was my Greek teacher. And he taught me, as he has taught many people, I think, the benefits of utterly rigorous academic scholarship. If you got 9 out of 10, he would write "not bad" at the bottom of a piece of work. And it was never felt negatively. It was always an endorsement, but he had incredibly high standards. And he taught way beyond the specification of any exam paper that any of us were studying. And he had an utter passion for languages and to display to the class the connection between different languages and where different words came from. And so the learning of Greek was incidental to being on the roller coaster of his passion about education and about language.
And do you think that experience influenced the type of teacher that you then became or tried to become or wanted to become? Yeah,
I think I hope I am a combination of Traps's rigour and a couple of other staff's compassion. I'm not saying he lacked compassion, but he was pretty ferocious in his expectations of brilliance. And I think that's really healthy. And sometimes we settle for second best too often. And actually, children tend to live up to expectations and live down to expectations, depending on where we set them as adults.
And you're a father of 2 yourself. You have a boy and a girl currently at Millfield Prep School. What do you wish for their education?
Gosh, well, as headmaster, I suppose I wish that they're never in my office, if you know what I mean. Seriously, they're 10 and 12. Fundamentally, I want them to be happy. I want them to know instinctively what is right and wrong. I want them to have an instinctive sense of other and what privilege means and the need to help other people because that is what you should do. I want them to be challenged in their thinking and not to be lazy in their thinking. I want them to be challenged to be better versions of themselves every day and every year. I want them to be at ease, to be whoever they want to be and to feel happy communicating that to people around them and to me. I want them to feel ready to challenge me and to challenge other adults around them as well.
And so when you first joined Millfield, what were your first impressions of the school, and what have you implemented here so far with the leadership team around you that you are most proud of?
I wonder if I can take that question a bit further back, actually. I went on a family holiday to Castle Carey about 10 or 12 years ago, and I remember driving through street and then coming along the side of the Millfield site and seeing the vastness of the Millfield site. And I actually turned to Alice and my wife and said, crikey, I wonder who'd ever want to work there. It seems enormous. So I recognise that is possibly the reaction that some people first have when they see Millfield. But actually, it's quite difficult to read, and it feels much more intuitive if you think of it as being like a small university. I think that's partly to do with its scale, but also to do with its internationalism, the diversity of the activities that we do, and the scale of our aspirations, and the way in which we go about things. My first impressions here were of a school that was at ease with itself, and I really like that. I think that that's something to be cherished. There are too many independent schools where people are not at ease within the organisation. And I visited another independent school, which some people would compare to Millfield. And the staff were being served by waiters in white gloves, and they didn't even know what the names of the waiters was, and they didn't greet them. And that's such an alien environment, and it's so different to Millfield, where it feels like we are one community, and it feels like there is an egalitarian approach to conversation and to hierarchies that is surely helpful in terms of children's education.
And in terms of some of the things that you've implemented since you've been here, what do you think are the most important, or the ones that you're most proud of so far?
I've sought to build a team which is empowered to lead and which buys into the values of Millfield. We went through a year-long process of establishing what those values are. And we look for people to be authentic, to be themselves, to feel that they're at ease. We look for people to be brilliant and not to be ashamed of that brilliance. We look for them to be curious because we think that people asking questions of things and being curious has been lost in education. We look for them to be disruptors, and that was the most controversial of the values when we went through the process. But actually, it's been the most successful, hasn't it, in terms of chiming and resonating with the sort of organisation Millfield is. And we're all looking for disruptors in our employment, so why shouldn't we look for that in students as well? And finally, that we are a team that is kind. Because again, I feel that this country and possibly society more widely has lost its way in terms of kindness. So to answer your question and the bit of the previous one that I'd forgotten to answer, probably that piece of work around the values, because Millfield is big and it is disparate and there are multiple tribes here, and I want children and staff to feel that they have a tribe, ideally several tribes that they feel part of and where they can be themselves. And having those school values allows people to understand that those values will be common across everything that happens at Millfield. Of course, there will be very different tribes, whether that be in music, whether that be in rugby. And hey, don't forget that people often cross across these tribes. But in all of those tribes, those values will be consistent. So probably it has been the piece of the conversation that has gone on around those values, and that we keep talking about it, and that we obsess about those values, and that we know that the work is never done.
And having been here for almost 5 years now, what would you say is the biggest misconception of Millfield?
That it's all about sport. Many people come to Millfield because of the sport and the sports facilities, but what they're looking for is the ethos. Of course, they're looking for the facilities, but they could get those in other locations. They're looking for the ethos, they're looking for the education, they're looking for the sense of team, they're looking for the pastoral support, and they're looking to discover their brilliance. And that might well not be in where they believe it to be when they first come to us. And that's what's special about Millfield. People judge us by our sports results, but actually I'm far more interested in what people's lifelong relationship with sport is. I would not judge the success of sport now by which competitions or tournaments we win. I would judge it by people's relationship with sport 10 years after they've left us. Also, if you just look at our music programs or our art programs or our academic profile, you see that we are actually as impressive in each of those areas, but because there aren't the same levels of competition for people to see or participate in externally, they don't recognise it.
And that answer there leads me very nicely onto my next question. Are you a sporting man yourself? I've heard that you are known to be seen running the streets of Street on a regular basis.
I love my sport, and I recognise, certainly from my point of view, personal fitness is really important. And I have quite a busy job. And I have responsibility for quite a lot of people, a lot of children and a lot of staff, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And I don't think I could do my job as well as I do if I wasn't fit. That period of exercise allows me to... I run or cycle every morning, and that period of exercise allows me to clarify my thinking, to deal with tricky conversations, to rehearse things ready for the day, but also just to sense flow and rhythm, that sense of being free and being connected to nature and doing something that you enjoy and doing something you're quite good at. And doing something where you can see benefits every day from your participation in it. All of that is powerful. It's also something that I'm able to do with other people, and that sense of team, that sense of communication and of improvement with those other people is very important. So I absolutely see the benefit of sport and what it teaches children.
And with your running, you're not talking about a 2-mile jog, are you? You've run some quite long distances.
I have gradually run further and further. Maybe that's just to cover up going slower and slower as time goes on. The longest run I think I've done is 100 miles. I recognise that there are many people that have gone much further than that. But that is quite a healthy mental challenge, actually, as much as it is a physical challenge. And I wonder if there is benefit to my work to be able to master that challenge of a long run or a long cycle.
And alongside running, obviously you probably don't have huge amounts of spare time during term time. What are your other interests outside of school? You've talked about your busy schedule and balancing your own well-being in that last question. And balancing your work and home life. And you live on site, you live right near the swimming pool at the bottom of the campus. So how is it that you go about switching off?
You definitely don't switch off in a boarding school by separation. And if people try to do that, they try to take themselves away. In my position and in my experience, it doesn't work. I'm very, very lucky that my work often involves supporting events where students are competing or performing or presenting, and that's a tremendous privilege. So this Friday I'll go to a concert. Other nights I'll be at a Minerva lecture. I might support the sport on Wednesday afternoon or on Saturday afternoon. I might go and support when students are competing or performing nationally. And that's a massive privilege to have that as part of your work. And so that's part of who I am, that I take pleasure in seeing that happen. I cook I enjoy cooking. And if I find that if you're disciplined about it, you can cook something special in the space of just 5 minutes, and that allows you to switch off. I love reading, and reading allows you to take yourself to another world in the space of just one page, whatever it might be that you're reading. I quite like talking to people, and I find joy in being able to speak to people and understand their point of view. I love art. I love music and I love the distraction that it provides, and being able to see or listen to other people's mastery for me is a real joy, and being able to try to enjoy the beauty of something but also look at the mastery of it as well is fascinating.
And moving on to something a little bit more serious, what concerns you most about education in the UK today? Now, obviously that's a big question, but also what are the opportunities that lie ahead?
Education is essentially in Britain still stuck in terms of policy. It's stuck in the Victorian era, and educational outcomes, be they A-levels or GCSEs, are principally tools for government to measure schools. I'm not saying they don't have some merit for children as well, but the principal benefit of GCSEs and A-levels are for government to measure schools, and that's the wrong way round. Secondly, the employers of today are crying out for massively different skills to those that A-levels are testing. I do think that universities have a degree of responsibility here, because typically our A-level system is produced in a way that feeds a university system. So there needs to be a radical rethink, and the rethink could go like this and should go like this. A very simple panel of employers, and universities and schools. It's very easy to agree what the skills are that employers need, and then it's very easy for us to track back through university to school to develop curricula that feed into those skills, which principally are around creativity of thinking, capacity to network, capacity to build a team, capacity to think divergently. That's where Millfield's investment in neurodiversity over the many decades would pay off as well. We've also got to have a society that is fit and healthy and recognises the responsibility that we all have to look after each other and to look after ourselves. And I believe that all of that is absolutely achievable, but not without a radical rethink. And that government, if it was really desiring of improvement, would recognise that and would be able quite quickly to bring together a group of people to recommend the changes that are required. But my fear is that we are beholden to a government which is short-termist in its approach and is only ever looking to either the next headline or the next election, whichever comes further, if it ever comes closer. And whilst so long as that's the case, we're never going to get the change that we need to.
And are there other models of education in other parts of the world that are doing this better than we are in the UK?
Yeah, I think that there are plenty of models that you can look to. You can look to Sweden as a possible model. You can look to Holland as a possible model. There's a couple of amazing schools in Holland where learning is done on a project basis, and groups are to a certain extent self-selecting, as are the tasks that those groups undertake. But the skill is in the teacher or coach, whose job it is to ensure that the national curriculum, which is actually relatively rigid in those countries, is still delivered through those projects that the children are doing. I think if we were to have the courage to do something like that, we would see really quickly the quick advances that it's possible to make. That's quite scary, because it involves investing massively in teachers and giving teachers the skills and the freedom that they need and the space that they need to be able to deliver that. So it's quite a daunting change, but the models are out there and it's relatively easy for us to look at those models.
So we currently have around 1,330 children in the senior school at Millfield. How do we go about catering for all levels of ability, interests and styles? And would you say there is a typical Millfield student in 2023?
The easy answer for me would be to say there isn't a typical Millfield student, but I'm not sure that's helpful. And so what I want to do is I want to answer the first part of your question first, which is how do we cater to that diversity? And then I'll come to whether I think there might be common traits to a Millfield student that are maybe helpful to think about. So we're big. And our scale 1330 in the senior school, as you said, that allows us to manage the diversity of intake, because it allows allows us to allocate groups of ability. Whereas in a smaller school, you might find yourself as the only child of a particular ability or a particular interest in a subject. And so firstly, we operate at scale, and that scale allows us to have distinct ability and interest groups. Secondly, our mindset is firmly rooted in our boarding ethos. We have day students too, but our mindset is rooted in our boarding ethos, which is that we care about the whole child, and that we recognise that learning happens at all times of the day and night. And so teachers are having interactions with students in prep in the evenings, in activities, on a Saturday afternoon, on a Sunday. And that's true of day students as well as of boarders, because that's when development happens, and that's when children are prepared to be honest and open and develop a safe relationship with the people around them. So scale, then caring about the individual and our boarding ethos, and a recognition of neurodiversity and of physical diversity and social diversity, and an education approach which is not frightened of understanding the background that a child has come from. Too many schools are delivering a product, and they're operating a cookie cutter model of education, where they say, you send me your child and I will do the same thing that I've done for the last 25 years, and at the end of it they will look like this. That is absolutely not what we are doing. We are looking to have an education model which honours the individual and which understands the background that child is coming from. It might be very different to the stereotypical British background. They might be coming from a very different culture, and it is incumbent on the Millfield community to understand that background. In terms of common traits to a Millfield child, I do believe there is some commonality, and I think it is that there is a desire to get the most out of a Millfield education, a preparedness to get involved, a willingness to compromise, a sense that we get better through our involvement in team. And I don't mean sports team, I mean we get better from working with each other. An acknowledgement of diversity, an acknowledgement of difference, a desire to learn from those that are different from ourselves.
And you mentioned before all the different events that you go to where you are watching students perform, or watching them on the sports field, or interacting with them as they present. What would you say, if you had to choose one single thing that makes you the most happy in your role as headmaster, what would that be?
It's the energy. So if I'm feeling like I'm losing focus in the middle of the afternoon, I get out and I walk around the campus and I look at the range of activities on in the classroom, in sport, in music, in the art department, everywhere, and I just soak up the energy, and I have conversations with our students who are happy to talk about what they have been involved in that day, and the energy that is exuded by them is rejuvenative. Our campus is beautiful, the crocuses are out at the moment, that helps as well, but it's the energy of everything that goes on at Millfield. That can be wearing too, but if you are able to go out and soak it up, it leaves you feeling rejuvenated and younger.
And when you're doing that, do you feel like you're also learning something new every day, going around the campus? And what kind of things do you think they are? I'm
definitely with Einstein in this, and the older I get, the more I realise how little I know. Since I've been here, I have made a point of speaking about how much I have learnt about the challenges of children growing up in different racial backgrounds, the challenges of children growing up with different sexual identities, and I learn that from our students. And I learn from our staff who are at the top of their game about what is new in their subjects. And that's why going to lunch here and being able to sit next to a completely eclectic staff, whether they be support staff or academic staff, and to listen and learn from them is beneficial to me, because I am a steward and a coach. I am not a dictator about what must happen at Millfield.
So another big question here. What are your plans for Millfield in 5, 10 and 15 years?
Okay. I hope you're not going to hold me to this, but in 5 years we will be well on the way with our Millfield Brilliance campaign, looking to raise 100 million to pay for bursaries in perpetuity and to put Millfield on a similar footing to that of other big independent schools. In 10 years, Millfield will be known as the hub of choice for key areas of staff development and teacher learning and adult learning, as well as still being at the forefront of youth sport development and at the cutting edge of neurodiverse education globally. And in 15 years, I dearly hope we will see a new education system in the UK, and Millfield's voice will have been loud in the creation of that, and people will recognise in that new blueprint for education many of those beautiful tenets that come from Millfield now.
And you spoke there about the Discover Brilliance Fund. Why should parents, former students, staff, the whole Millfield community, why should they donate, if they can, to the school's fund?
The Millfield mix is what makes Millfield special. Over 50% of children that come to Millfield benefit from bursary provision. We need to continue that, and we need to extend it. And we're only going to be able to do that if we can build up this fund. By doing that, other children, as I did, can experience the transformative power of bursaries and can experience the transformative power of Millfield's education. Millfield does unlock brilliance, and we have seen hundreds of examples of that over the past few decades. And we can amplify that, we can increase that if we have bursary support.
And if you weren't a headmaster now, what would you be instead?
Good question. I would either be a blacksmith or I would be CEO of a charity looking to invest in girls' education in certain key areas of the world where girls are denied access to education. I'm serious about both of those. So I have an interest in the creation of beautiful materials. I think that craftsmanship is being lost in the UK, and I think that we should all be connected to craft in some way. And for me, it would be to become a blacksmith. I have a very run-down property in Scotland. It also needs a lot of gates and fences, so that may be partly the reason.
Have you ever had a go?
I have had a go, and I was utterly hooked. And then the second, I hope, is self-evident, the reason that I would want to do it. And I think that whilst we live in a world where, because of who you are, what gender you are denied education, then we should all never give up fighting for that inequality to be taken away.
Is that a direction that you might choose in the future? You're not yet 50.
Thank you. I've been accused of being 50 for the last 40 years, but I've still not made it there. Yeah, I think I would. Millfield is an amazing organisation to be part of, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of it. However, I won't be here forever, and I anticipate, hopefully, being able to add value to other organisations in the future. And if it was possible for me to do that, then I would welcome it with open arms.
And finally, what would be your 3 takeaways to our listeners about Millfield? If you want them to go away thinking of 3 key things from this podcast, what would they be? Don't
be lazy about what Millfield is. Of course, it's brilliant at sport. That's a given, and it's true, and it's always been true. But it's lazy of people to say that that's all that Millfield is. Number 2, that education is a gift, and it is a key which can unlock everything that needs to be transformed, and we all need to buy into that. We all need to recognise it. And number 3, enjoy and participate. Education should be about happiness. It should be about joy. So remember to enjoy yourself and to laugh.
Gavin, thank you for sharing all of this fantastic insight into you and your vision and values. I'm sure it has given our listeners a real insight into what Millfield is like and what drives you to make it even better every day. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with Headmaster Gavin Horgan. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Liz. Goodbye.